The problem started last year when the PSC drafted a package of bills that changed the method telephone, gas, power, and other utilities pay their fees to the PSC. PSC Commissioner Lynn Greer says the package would have left the PSC financially sound if passed intact. But Greer says the utility lobbyist managed to convince legislators to kill most of the package and pass a single bill benefiting the utility timetable to pay those fees. The commissioners say that left the PSC with about an $800,000 shortage this year. The commission drafted a bill that would have corrected the problem this year and offered it to the legislature. But the commissioners say they're getting strong impressions from some legislators that the bill will not pass before the session ends next week. Although the bill does have a chance of passing and the financial problems disappearing, the commission is gearing up for the worst by drafting a plan that would lay off as many as 30 of the 124 employees who work for the commission. Today's meeting was to discuss what guidelines they should have to follow in deciding what employees would wind up on the layoff list, while at the same time preserving the Commission's ability to perform its regulating duties. The Commission says the plan will be ready for State Personnel Board approval by next Tuesday. Between now and then, the Commissioners say they'll be working hard to get the bill in a position to pass, hoping to avoid the layoff alternative. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Public Service Commission.
The worst week in Vietnam, there were 352 casualties, and yet even now, weekly on our American... Next on our...
I'm Jackie Ross with WSFA.
They have committed to open a trauma service within the next year. Now, it's a level 2 service, which is a little different from the fanciest one up in Baltimore. In Opelika, they've also committed to develop a level 2 center.
The PSC commissioners met today to talk about the possible layoffs and the reasons behind it. Commissioner Lynn Greer says the problem started last year when the PSC offered a package of bills to the legislature changing the way utilities pay their fees to the commission. Greer says lobbyists for these utilities singled out just one of those bills which benefited them and left the PSC with a cash shortage. Part of that package to correct the cash shortage was reintroduced this year, but Greer says the utilities have managed to convince legislators to tie it up as well. But the bill is still in a position to pass when the legislature meets for its last day next week. The commissioners say if the bill doesn't pass, the commission won't be able to make ends meet unless it can cut back. And even though the commission is considering dropping some customer complaint toll-free telephone lines and virtually stopping travel expenses, it says as many as 30 people will have to be laid off to make up the difference. Commission President Billy Joe Camp says although they hold a ray of hope that the bill will pass Monday, the layoff plan will be ready for State Personnel Board approval by Tuesday. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the PSC.
I would invite your reaction to.
Assistant Superintendent Maggie Walker says all 20 teachers are in their first year of teaching and aren't tenured. She says the layoffs are necessary because of anticipated cuts in the Montgomery school system's federal budget.
In the Title I funds, we're anticipating some 20% cut when coupled with the raises that teachers are to get and the fringe benefits that we must pay from federal funds. This adds up to be a 40 to 42% cut. In order to be sure that we have the money to employ the teachers, we must employ or maintain and retain only those teachers whom we feel that we can pay for the next year's program. And therefore, we are terminating teachers.
Ms. Walker says she hopes the cuts won't materialize and the school system will rehire the teachers, but she says the system must be ready in case the cuts become reality. Ms. Walker says other cuts will be made in this year's summer school program. She says fewer teachers will be hired, the classes will be larger, and some services and the number of summer schools will be reduced. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
is reapportionment across this land to a one-man, one-vote concept, where today minorities have a higher representation in state and local governments than they do the federal government itself.
In the Title I funds, we're anticipating some 20% cut when coupled with the raises that teachers are to get and the fringe benefits that we must pay from federal funds. This adds up to be a 40 to 42% cut. In order to be sure that we have the money to employ the teachers, we must employ or maintain and retain only those teachers whom we feel that we can pay for the next year's program. And therefore, we are terminating teachers.
Used. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV.
Consumers paid 2.5% more for groceries this month, according to the latest Farm Bureau Food Price Survey. Overall, the survey shows Alabamians paid $27.34 for a market basket of goods in April. That represents an increase of 74 cents over prices for the same groceries in March. The survey shows produce helped lead the way for the higher costs. Produce was up a whopping 18% in April because of the late winter freeze in Florida and wet weather in California. Beef jumped 4.3% this month. Pork was up 1.7%, but dairy products dropped by 0.6% and poultry by 1%. Consumers in central Alabama paid the third highest price for groceries. In this area, a market basket cost $27.57. In South Alabama, they cost $27.81. And consumers in northwest Alabama paid the most at $28.34. There's some good news for consumers beginning this summer. Farm Bureau officials predict produce will be a bargain when more Alabama-grown goods goes to market if good crops are harvested. And officials predict food prices will increase by not more than 7% for the rest of this year. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News. Overall, Alabamians paid 2.5% more for groceries this month. The survey shows the average food basket in Alabama cost $27.34 in April, an increase of 74 cents over grocery prices in March. Consumers in central Alabama paid the third highest for goods. In this area, a market basket cost $27.57. In South Alabama, $27.81, and consumers in northwest Alabama paid $28.34, the highest in the state. Farm Bureau officials say food prices increased by 1% during the last 6 months, but they don't expect prices to increase by more than 7% this year. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
Public Service Commissioners have drawn up plans to lay off some 30 employees if House Bill 50 doesn't pass Monday, the final day of the regular legislative session. The commissioners say the way the utility now pays their fees to the PSC has left the commission about $800,000 short this year, and that House Bill 50 would correct the problem. Rawls says consumers in the state would suffer if the bill isn't passed by the Senate.
There's no way under God's green earth that they could give the consumers of this state a fair hearing. There's no way they could check that much. It has to be analyzed to find out if they need it. And they can't do it without these funds. They need the people.
Rawls says there are $1 billion worth of rate requests before the PSC, and with a layoff of 30 employees by the commission, consumers will be cheated.
But I know personally that they are doing a marvelous job for the people of this state. And I also know that if it were not for the hard work, day in and day out, that they do, that the consumers of this state would absolutely be paying an enormous rate right now.
Rawls says she'll be at the Capitol Monday to see how senators vote on the bill, and she says she'll make sure that people know who voted against the bill. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
He can cripple the staff because he right now at the present time has a bill, an application. For Lieutenant Governor of the state of Alabama. If I were him, I would get well informed before I make the statements that he made today on radio. The thing is that he doesn't really know exactly what the staff does. I doubt very seriously he's ever been down there to find out how they work.
What are you saying that he doesn't know?
He doesn't know how it works, evidently, because if he says that they got to appropriate these funds, it's already been appropriated, and they're paid to the consumers of this state in the rate hearings. It's built in. Every time you pay your utility bill, you pay a portion of it that'll come up here and pay the staff. That's how it's appropriated. If he doesn't know that, what does he need to run for Lieutenant Governor of the state of Alabama for? That's in the PSC right now. There's no way under God's green earth that they could give.
We have fun. We like George.
I love the people. I have a good time.
Some good Southern hospitality.
You know it. You bet.
It's a repeat trip for you. I've seen you here before.
Well, I'm almost, I might as well be born down here.
To be here. And the Southern hospitality, the growing popularity of it, the caliber people.
There are so many of us that vie, call up George Lindsay or make plans to come for the following year, and there's so many of us that want to come, and they only have so many allotted places, you know, for so many people to play, that it's really almost a contest now as to who comes. But it's not only wanting to come to Montgomery for the golf tournament, but also to help those young people that need our help. And I think that above all is what really brings us back, because we know that by our coming that maybe we can do something for those future citizens of the United States.
this time of year normally.
The magical mystery tour of the Atlanta Braves finally came to an end last night. Cincinnati holding on to beat Atlanta 2-1, stopping the longest season opening streak in Major League history at 13 victories.
Not really a letdown because, you know, it's just we lost 2-1. We had a lot of chances, and that's the thing that gets a little frustrating. But got to the point where I didn't know it was coming sooner or later.
Well, I just feel, you know, the same as after a loss, you know, in June or July. You know, there's no difference. This just the only difference is it's the first time I've felt this way since the season started.
You know, I wasn't really concerned about the streak coming in here, their streak. What we're talking about is every game is a two-game turn as far as being behind them, and that was our concern.
You know, we were 3-10 going into the game, and we're anxious to get things rolling and, you know, start making a run at these guys. They've been playing super ball, and we just went out and tried to play our game. It really didn't matter to us. You know, the fact that they were undefeated, it was just a matter of us trying to get in the win column.
And oddly enough, it was Bruce Berenyi's single in the 5th inning that drove in the first winning run of the season against the Atlanta Braves.
On the streets, and now we have somewhere to call our own to keep our kids out of the street. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Parks and Recreation, City Council, and the mayor for aiding us in getting this facility started. And I also want you to know, as kids and parents in this community, that this is your home, this is your place, that you must learn to keep up, and you will always have somewhere for it to play, and somewhere that you can keep kids out of the streets. And we hope that putting this park in this area, that it will help curb crime, which we think it has done in this community. And we're very proud of this community, and we're very proud of this facility.
Get out! Get out!
And I'll make my choice. But today, y'all.
Early on, it looked as though the Hawks might be going back to Philly for that third and deciding game. Dan Roundfield, the spark for Atlanta, he had a game-high 29. His bucket inside here with the foul gave the Hawks their biggest lead at 33-24 in the second quarter. But the Dr. Julius Erving brought the 76ers back. He had 28. His jumper here helped propel Philadelphia to a one-point halftime lead. The second half was a physical battle. Watch here as Lionel Hollins drives and takes an elbow from the Hawks' Tree Rollins. Hollins then counters with a shot to the head of the Tree. Then it's off to the races. Lucky for both teams, neither man was ejected, but Hollins did suffer a broken knuckle. To the final seconds of regulation play, the Sixers up by 2. Roundfield buries this jumper with 12 seconds remaining to tie the game at 90 and send it into overtime. In the OT, it was the doctor's show. Philly leading by 2 and the clock running down. He blocks this drive to the hoop by Roundfield. Caldwell Jones then sinks 2 free throws at the other end, giving the Sixers a 4-point lead. Irving added another free throw to ice it, the final 98-95. And Hawks coach Kevin Lockery lets the officials know just what he thought of it all. Philadelphia wins the mini-series 2-0. They meet Milwaukee in the best-of-7 Eastern Conference semifinals.
The sights and sounds of new home construction are not as common as they used to be. Soaring interest rates and a sagging economy combine to turn the American dream of owning a home into a financial nightmare. While federal officials are hammering out solutions, this is becoming the sign of the times. Lots of homes to buy and lots of people who want to buy them, but not at today's interest rates. Well, suppose you could buy homes at an interest rate of no more than 11%, with Uncle Sam subsidizing the rest of the interest, at least for the first 5 years. Senator Howell Heflin told a group of home economists today in Mobile that just such a proposal is in the works.
The Lugar-Heflin bill is basically designed to give an interest advantage in the first 5 years, and then you'd go to the regular FHA prices at the end of the 5 years. In the end, it wouldn't cost any money. It would be all repayable. So
in the beginning, however, the proposal would cost about $1 billion federal bucks a year, but Heflin feels the economic impact would justify the expense. If more homes are sold, more would be built, more workers would be hired to build them, and more materials would be bought to build them with. Thus, everyone profits. The bill is reported to have good support from both Democratic and Republican leaders, and Heflin feels its chances for passage are good.
It was called the 1982 Alabama Hospitality and Tourism Conference, and it brought together leaders in the tourism industry for 3 days of meetings and workshops, all aimed at finding better ways to sell Alabama as a tourist attraction. The conference was sponsored by the Alabama Travel Council, the Alabama Hotel Motel Association, and the Bureau of Publicity and Information. Bureau Director Caroline Kavanaugh says hotel and motel personnel are very important to the state's image because they are often the first people tourists meet when they enter the state, and first impressions are important, and they seem perhaps even more important when weighed against the impact tourism has on the state economy.
In 1981, we were responsible, the tourism industry, for $2.5 billion being generated in the state. The tourism industry directly affected 63,000 plus jobs, and in 1981 the tourism industry, through the different sales tax, etc., was responsible for more than $95 million being paid into state treasury, and that did not count any gasoline sales tax.
In all, the conference was a chance for industry leaders to get together with each other and with state officials to plan their strategy, to sharpen their skills, to promote what Ms. Kavanaugh calls a spirit of optimism about the state, and enthusiasm that she and others think is vitally important to the job of making others outside the state want to see what Alabama has to offer. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
You see, I knew that
The crowd began gathering early, anticipating the excitement of the band, the floats, the clouds, and the stars. The parade wound its way around and stale and stretched for more than a mile. Children and the adults waved their favorite stars. Son, she's on his board now. Leslie Nielsen. And half dozen more. Most of whom took time to sign autographs for their enthusiastic fans. Every float imaginable was represented and was enjoyed by all. Following the morning parade, the Special Olympic kids were shuttled to the Montgomery Zoo for an afternoon picnic and a visit with the animals.
special day for some special children and adults, all made worthwhile with just a smile. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
A crime to disclose and found to his horror that he had landed in the cage of the king of the beasts. I was speaking in a church, yes, politicians sometimes, is that we have been reacting almost reflexively by old slogans and by old modes of thought that have governed our thinking in this entire post-war era at a time when clearly millions of people around the world are beginning to fear, as they have never feared before, that the ultimate disaster could be upon us if we do not find new ways and new approaches to our problems. Albert Einstein pressed up against the glass of his cage watching him perform that a letter came to my office, the office that I now maintain in Washington, D.C., saying Ronald is pressed up against the glass of his cage watching him perform that information. We cannot reward aggression. And clearly, even though historically and otherwise the Argentinians may think they have a just claim, I'm not going to support any country that lands troops and by force of arms seeks to change international boundaries.
Let's talk basketball a minute. You just finished what appears to be an outstanding recruiting season.
Well, I don't know if you put it in terms of outstanding, but it was adequate, and it served our needs to a certain degree. I don't think you ever have an outstanding year, Rick, unless you get a center of the 6'11", 7-foot range. But we feel some weaknesses in our program. We feel some problem areas, and we got a little more depth added to the program. And I think the one thing that impresses me about the crew coming in is the fact that they wanted to come to Auburn, and I like that.
Virgil Burge says you have to learn the habits of the fish, and he should know he's been traveling the country over 20 years now, fishing for most of his meals, carving dozens of small toys which he sells and sometimes gives away, and making music on an old antifreeze jug with a broom handle neck and fish line strings.
Simple song, simple melodies on one string, and it's called a ha, and then a two-string I play on it's called a ha-ha, and then when I make a three-string like this one, I call it a ha-ha-has. And I play,
He says his travel started back in the early 60s when he was doing defense work in Ohio for the Air Force. He says he had a nervous breakdown and then went on the road, walking and riding all over the country in 48 states. Enough time and miles to make a lot of friends and see a lot of changes.
But the build-up in this country has been so great in the last 20 years that the changes are noticeable if you were camping and hiking like I am, because there used to be lots of places where the young people or people that wanted to go fishing and camping could camp and fish for free along the rivers and lakes, and now practically everything, somebody's got the rights to it, you see, and they got it.
These days, Burge says he's writing a book, a chronicle of all he's seen and learned. He says he could live with family or friends, but he likes fishing. At last report, he was headed north, wherever that may be. He says he hears that fishing there is good. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
Mobile has its share of problems. Most revolve around a lack of money. With the entire state in the midst of a full-blown recession, most cities are feeling that crunch. So it's not with much optimism that local government officials listen to President Reagan's plans for new federalism. The president has proposed a transfer of 43 federal programs, plus food stamps and aid to dependent children, to the state level. Several hundred local officials from towns and cities all over Alabama are meeting here at the Municipal Auditorium to discuss those problems. They'll be meeting through Tuesday. Local officials apparently feel they've found a champion in Senator Howell Heflin. He didn't offer many solutions in addressing the League of Municipalities today, but he did issue a warning.
Chances are that the state will not assume any of the federal programs that might be coming down under federalism, which will then mean as to whether or not they will be carried on will be a decision by city fathers or by the county commissioners or the county boards of education. And the issue, of course, will liable to come down as to whether or not you can afford it. Whether the people
Heflin says more local control is a good concept, but not the way it's being proposed. He also echoed a growing cry against interest rates. He says high interest has now taken over public enemy #1 status from inflation.
Actions will also be brought with the United States Treasury Department to suspend revenue sharing monies to the city of Mobile and to the county. The National Black Police Association will also call on all citizens, both black and white, to hold their elected officials accountable and who are charged with making their homes and streets safe.
The rain may have stopped the golf tournament, but it didn't seem to dampen the enthusiasm of the celebrities, who eagerly agreed to have an indoor autograph session at the Downtowner Motor Inn. Hundreds of autograph seekers poured into the lobby of the hotel and patiently stood in line, waiting to see their favorite celebrities. The younger fans cornered NBC Game of the Week commentator Joe Garagiola and former Chico and the Man star Scatman Carruthers. Tournament host George Lindsay himself seemed disappointed with the cancellation, but still spoke favorably about the results of the weekend benefit.
We've had the whole town, the whole community in the state, and all the lovely people, volunteers and workers, and everybody has cooperated with us. The weather didn't, but who cares about the weather?
Lindsay says as a result of the tournament cancellation, proceeds for Alabama's special children will be somewhat less this year. Nevertheless, he's still optimistic.
We won't make quite as much as we made last year, but you know, like next week, here at the office at the downtown and at some radio stations sit around, we're going to let people know where they can get a program. You know, it's a $2 for the program where they can come by and pick one up. So maybe that'll help us some. Thank you, Montgomery.
From the Downtowner Motor Inn, Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
Last week, the Senate and House sent the governor 2 budgets that could provide the higher salary increases, a move he says is in direct conflict with private industry, which is working to hold salaries and benefits down, according to the governor.
I don't know of a company, employees and employers are sitting down
and negotiating downward. Without exception on fringe benefits, and in most cases, wages are either being froze or cut. Now, Chris, here we are in the state of Alabama, the second highest unemployment of any state in the United States of America, and we are coming forward. The legislature wants to give a 16% pay raise to teachers and a 12% pay raise to state employees.
Working at his mansion today, he said he'll start a series of meetings with legislators tomorrow morning to see if they're willing to change their minds and support the 10% employee and 14% teacher pay raise. He says if they won't, he'll kill the bills and bring them back in a special session. The governor contends the special session will put pressure on the members since it's an election year. And in explaining that to us, he mistakenly interjected his own pay raise suggestions of 10 and 14%.
And I want to see some legislators go to the rubber plants in Gadsden, up in Florence, Alabama, the automotive plants and the steel mills in Birmingham and all around this state, and say we gave public employees a 14% pay raise on one hand, a 10% pay raise on the other, and put the state in bad shape, and you are cutting your wages and cutting your fringe benefits, and you're going to probably have to pay us some more taxes. I want them to do that right on the eve of Election Day if that's what they want to do.
The decision by the governor today and the scheduled meeting with the legislators tomorrow could be all for naught, since the legislators have been in favor of a 16% teacher pay raise and 12% state employee pay raise since the beginning of this session. Unless there has been a massive change of heart, we're in line for a special session to deal specifically with the budgets. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the governor's mansion.
What's yours, Sam? And finally, I just had to pull up and stop.
What? I said, you really are? If you're not left-handed, you're not in this.
Well, one of the big things that has happened is the fact that the Reagan administration has proposed a significant enhancement of the National Civil Defense Program, which will have a tremendous impact on our program here in Alabama. We are in the process of attempting to develop a 5-year developmental program that we hope at the end of 5 years, which would be approximately by September 1987, that we will have a program that can contribute significantly to the survival of the people of this state, not only for nuclear attack, but for natural disaster as well.
Beginning Monday in TV 12's 10 o'clock report, Gina Gregory brings you the first of a 5-part series featuring a fashion preview for the summer of '82. Gina discovers how important the right color selections can be in the overall fashion look. Plus, she'll give you professional beauty tips to help you choose the colors that are right for you. Gina Gregory's special fashion preview for the summer of '82, an exclusive feature of TV 12's 10 o'clock report. Beginning Monday in TV 12's 10 o'clock report, Gina Gregory brings you the first of a 5-part series featuring a fashion preview for the summer of '82. Gina discovers how important the right color selections can be in the overall fashion look. Plus, she'll give you professional beauty tips to help you choose the colors that are right for you. Gina Gregory's special fashion preview for the summer of '82, an exclusive feature of TV 12's 10 o'clock report. Tonight in TV 12's 10 o'clock report, Gina Gregory brings you the first of a 5-part series featuring a fashion preview for the summer of '82. Tonight, Gina discovers how important the right color selections can be in the overall fashion look. Plus, she'll give you professional beauty tips to help you choose the colors that are right for you. Don't miss Gina Gregory's special fashion preview for the summer of '82. Tonight on the 10 o'clock report on TV 12.
One thing dentists like to see is their patients with adorable smiles. One thing politicians do is smile. Smiling comes easy for politicians, especially when announcing future political plans.
For a race a year
Joe
ago.
McCorkadell told the group
And I
he
guess
wants
I'd
the
have
chance
to say
be the
that
next
my
governor of
thought
Alabama.
again
He says
to
the next
Speaker.
administration faces many
Speaker
challenges
McCorkadell
and opportunities,
represents-
such as completion of the Tennessee-Tongue-Bigby Waterway Project, more oil lease windfalls, and further development of the state's natural resources. After his speech, the group didn't ask McCorkadell any questions. He apparently had answered them all, particularly concerning his intentions.
I just want to be governor.
But former State Attorney General Bill Baxley says he's going to start campaigning for governor in July. He says many House speakers have run, but none has been elected. He says the same applies to former governors, and not one Republican has been elected. Baxley, who was runner-up in the last gubernatorial election, says he wants to win this time.
We have been taught since grammar school about the potential that we had in this state, the natural resources that we had. It's always the future's just around the corner.
And former Governor George Wallace still says he's a possible candidate, but his brief address seemed to have brought the most smiles from the State Dental Association. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
Our candidates who invade now are urging me to...
I'll put you on guard now. and
House
don't
Speaker Joe
hesitate to
McCorkadell
ask
says
questions
he began
because
thinking
when you
about
first
running
get
for
here
governor
24
about a
years,
year
you get
ago.
16.
He says that's when results
And
of
I'll
the
be
state's
glad to
reapportionment
respond to
plan
any
showed
question you might
Alabama
have.
had fallen short in many areas of
Speaker
opportunities.
McCorkadell represents
Also,
all
he
the
says the
Speaker of
impact of the
House,
president's
and
new
this is
federalism
the last
plan
day
on
of the
Alabama
regular
has drawn
session, so
concern,
until
as
you
well
get
as
back.
future oil and gas developments.
at the-
McCorkadell says his record in the legislature qualifies him to be the next governor of Alabama.
I've spent 24 years up here, and I think I know what this state needs.
Former State Attorney General Bill Baxley knows what it's like to be on the gubernatorial trail. He was runner-up in the last election, but this time, Baxley says he feels certain he'll win. Baxley, too, speaks of his past record as a primary consideration for governor.
Best reason that you could give to promote somebody to a higher job is not what they say, but what they've done in the jobs they've held.
And former Governor George Wallace says the gubernatorial candidates will be campaigning on many of the same issues he spoke about during the 60s. Wallace still says he's a possible candidate and is taking the necessary steps to become a candidate should he decide to run. Tomorrow, Montgomery Mayor Emery Falmer and Lieutenant Governor George McMillan will get a chance to tell why they should be elected governor if they decide to run. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
The selection began at 9:30 this morning and is still going on at this hour. The reason the process is so slow is that the defense and the prosecutors are individually interviewing a list of 176 potential jurors regarding their knowledge of the case. When the striking process is complete, only 12 jurors and 2 alternates to hear the case will remain. Jury selection for the retrial was held 3 months ago. However, the court failed to choose the necessary number of jurors for the final 12-man selection as required by law. That resulted in today's process starting all over again. Berard, who was convicted of killing 2 skating rink employees, 16-year-old John Thompson and 14-year-old Jeffrey Smith, spent 3 years on death row.
but was given a new trial when the U.S. Supreme Court struck down part of Alabama's death penalty law. Depending on how late it is when the jury selection is finally complete, Judge William Gordon could call for the trial to begin sometime tonight, or he may wait until tomorrow morning before allowing attorneys to begin opening arguments. In any event, once the trial does start, it's expected to last several days. From the Montgomery County Courthouse, Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
They gathered as they have for 116 years, the Montgomery Confederate Ladies Memorial Association. Their group was formed in 1866 and designated April 26th as the day to honor the men and women of the Confederacy. The date was chosen because it was on April 26, 1865, that General Joseph Johnston surrendered his Army of Tennessee to General Sherman. It was the last large Confederate army to surrender. Today, speakers at the ceremony said the spirit of the Confederacy provided character to the nation, and though the age of the Confederacy is long past, the virtues and qualities of the Old South are not lost. Then a simple wreath was placed at the foot of the Confederate monument. National Guard soldiers fired a gun salute, and taps was played. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
Worker, the phenomenon of urbanization, and note that it was estimated that the South received about 60% of all capital investment in the United States. Savings and retirement income to be spent and invested in the region. But not only retirees, younger people, much of which came from outside the region. By 1970, therefore, these seemingly unrelated events, World War II, the mechanization, and vibrant Sun Belt. Just as people migrated to the Sun Belt seeking a milder climate, southern. During the decade of the 70s, the region's population grew by 12.3 million persons during the previous decade. Although all of the southern states grew a century. During the period
had an average like that. Well, I've about gone many more. It seems now that the next gubernatorial administration or the next governor is going to face many different problems than has been faced in this state for years past. First, we're going to have a lot of opportunities. We're going to have Alabama House of Representatives. 1967 is the hardest working member of the House.
Questions are a little bit better, and then at the end, you have specific questions about anything. Let's try to get into what you want to hear.
A past vice president of the ADA, and
with the exception of the National Republican Party leadership, come to me urging me to run for governor. And in view of the fact that I defeated them without them in 1970, I will certainly consider that.
Okay, well, we welcome you here on this Confederate Memorial Day. Through the 5 years previously had not had much attention, either with many of the agencies and state administrators. We feel that this board should meet at least the Department of Pensions and Security. There have been advisors, and I thought she would talk to you about the type of services that material, the report, the program, or our recommendations and findings. We'd be happy to answer.
Fund DPSDT.
It's
program itself would really just be a line item, in the overall Medicaid program budget in the state of Alabama. Informed and better served. Currently, there is an informal linkage at the county level in this program that often seems to break down. Third, the Medical Services Administration should issue a policy on how assistance with transportation will be provided to clients requesting this assistance.
This is really kind of ridiculous. I'm delighted to be here and delighted to see Pat Levin. I'd like to look out on him one more time. But I don't want to take up people's time listening to me because I really don't have anything to say. I got to go try to recruit for next year. Pat has too.
That's right, Coach. If you'll promise me it'll just be one more time.
Than he deserves when he's successful, and then he gets more credit. And punt the football, and the game will be over.
Coach, should I get my same team?
Got your same team. You got it, and going to start the game 10-10. You got to start off where you left off last year.
How will you divide up our players?
Well, I'm going to divide the seniors, and I'll have the seniors in tonight, and let them choose sides.
How about the faculty and staff?
Well, they've already got the faculty and staff divided the same way they had them last year. So they've still got the same teams and the same coaches, and it'll be a new ball game. We're going to play it till somebody wins. If this one ends in a tie, we'll have a sudden death.
At the state capitol, the last day of the regular session of the legislature turned into one of a guessing game of the future of the state's two budgets. Chris Grimshaw is standing by for this live report at the capitol. Chris, you say that the governor wants to veto the budgets, and the House and Senate members spent the day trying to talk him out of it.
It has been a situation, Bob, where this is the last day of the 1982 regular session, and the governor is very upset and distraught about the size of pay raises that the legislature has offered to teachers and state employees, and they are trying to encourage him to come up with a compromise. The governor started a series of meetings with those legislators early this morning, meetings to talk about his threat to veto any budget that provides teachers a 16% and state employees a 12% pay raise. The governor says the only budgets he'll approve are ones providing teachers 14% and employees a 10% pay hike. But the House and Senate leadership don't appear to want to accept the lower pay proposal. For most of the day, the House leadership, which has been backing the governor on his proposal, has been encouraging the governor to agree to a compromise figure of 15% for teachers and 11% for state employees. Key members of the House leadership say they don't think that vetoing the budget and bringing the legislature back into a special session will put the governor in any better position to outmaneuver the Alabama Education Association forces who've been able to keep the larger pay raises so far. But the governor hasn't been swayed, apparently, so far. Following a series of meetings with House Speaker Joe McCorkadale, the stalemate still continues. During the day, the Senate worked briefly and then took a 3-hour lunch before beginning work again. They're working now. The House worked on a number of bills before taking a supper break. They are now on that supper break. House leaders say they hope that then when they come back from that supper break, the governor will have made up his mind on whether or not to agree to the compromise or stick to his effort to kill the 16% and 12% raises, and hope he can convince the legislature during a special session to accept the lower pay raises. The entire pay raise issue hinges on the fact of whether the state can afford it or not. The Alabama Education Association forces contend that they can afford it by switching some money around and reducing expenditures to other aspects of education. The governor contends that switching money around and the compromises made to other aspects of education are just too great to justify the extra 2% pay raise. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News, reporting live from the Capitol.
Thanks so much, Chris. We'll have an update tonight at 10. 3 of the top 5 contenders for the governor. Tonight, the Alabama legislature is coming down to the wire, and lawmakers appear ready to reach a compromise with Governor James on the pay raise issue. Chris Grimshaw is standing by at the state capitol. And, Chris, you say this apparent compromise was reached late this evening.
Yes, Mac, both the House and the Senate took a comfortable supper break tonight, during which time the key legislators who were involved in the give-and-take process on this budget had an opportunity to go over the differing views on the budget and the pay raise issue with Governor James. Governor James has been endorsing a pay hike of 14% for state teachers and a 10% employee pay hike for employees. The Alabama Education Forces have been successfully supporting a 16% teacher pay raise so far, and the legislative body has voted for a 12% state employee pay raise. Earlier today, the governor released a letter to legislators saying he wouldn't budge from his proposal, but the day has been filled by a series of meetings between key legislators and the governor on the possibility of a compromise. By 8:30 tonight, it appeared the compromise had been reached as the governor moved into House Speaker Joe McCorkadale's office for another series of last-minute meetings on the reported compromise. There are probably as many versions of what the compromise is as there are people to ask. But the most frequently mentioned compromise that's mentioned by officials of the governor's staff calls for an even split on the teacher pay raise difference. The governor giving 1% and education forces losing 1%, down to 15%, and state employees remaining at the governor's proposed 10% level. It's expected that the compromise will be offered to the full House shortly and that they will be encouraged to accept it, and if the House agrees, the Senate is also expected to be encouraged to agree. Right now, we're expecting that compromise to be offered, and some details on it that we have just been offered include not only the 15% teacher pay hike in the education budget, but the Department of Youth Services, which had been cut out of both budgets in the fight over 16%, has been fully restored to the education budget in this compromise that we understand is about to be offered. And the governor's war on illiteracy, which was also a victim of the compromise for 16%, appears now to be fully refunded in this reportedly compromised budget that we're expecting anytime shortly. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News, reporting live from the Capitol.
Thank you, Chris. 3 of the state's top...
10 years ago, there was a strikingly similar case when Arthur Bremer shot George Wallace. Bremer was trying to attract his mother's love and attention, according to the principal psychiatrist who testified at that trial, Dr. Sheila Gray, who says individuals like Bremer and Hinckley have the emotions of 5-year-olds who don't think of the consequences of their conduct.
This is a defect. In the same way that being nearsighted is a defect.
Does that mean he was born with it?
Probably.
In the Bremer case, the jury rejected an insanity defense. Carl Stern, NBC News, Washington.
Early in the day, it appeared the governor was going to stick to his threat to kill the budgets unless the House and Senate would agree to the governor's proposed 14% teacher and 10% state employee pay raises. Both houses had overwhelmingly approved the 16% and 12% pay raise budgets, and they didn't appear to be willing to change their minds. A day of negotiations between House Speaker Joe McCorkadale and the governor, though, ended in a compromise of 15% for teachers and 11% for state employees. The negotiations took most of